Friends, allies, and Americans, welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast, where we tell the stories of folks who defend your children's rights by advocating for inclusive public school systems and who fight for diversity across our nation. I'm your host, Karen Swoboda. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast. My guest today is Jenn Wiggin. Jenn is the producer of the award-winning documentary film Band Together. And Jenn, welcome to the podcast. It is so exciting to have you here today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I've been following this for a while and certainly following Defense of Democracy both nationally and locally here. So this is great.
Great. Thank you. Well, let's get right into it. Let's talk about your film, Band Together. Mm-hmm. Tell me, where did the idea come from to do that?
The idea came from, so I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I have a film production company. It's what we do. It's what I've done my whole life, basically. And one morning, my husband and I were reading the newspaper, and there was a front page article that said, "Students fight back." And it was a picture of a couple of high school students speaking into a microphone. Mm-hmm. And we thought, fight back against what? This will be interesting. And we read the article, and both my husband and I looked at each other and said, they're banning books still? How is this happening? And we didn't know about this. And it was an article about in Beaufort, South Carolina, that there were two parents that had gone to the school board with a list of 97 books. And they had said, we want these removed from the schools immediately. These books are pornographic. And if you don't remove them, we will go to the sheriff's office and we will file charges against you, criminal charges against you for disseminating pornography. They said that to the school board. The school board in Beaufort is a fairly reasonable school board, but nobody wants that kind of trouble. So what had happened, and this is when we read the article, what had happened is that they had pulled them overnight, 97 books, for review, and they were setting up a review process. The students that were being highlighted were a part of a local group called DALO, the Diversity Awareness Youth Literacy Organization. And it was created in South Carolina by some students who created it as a book club. And the book club was meant to discuss diverse literature. We're not all the same. I want to understand other people more. I want people to understand me. I want to learn more about what's happening in my community. So it was really a club to read diverse books. And it very quickly turned into members of that club saying, we need to now go to board meetings and pay attention to what's happening and speak out. And one of the students who they invited into to participate in DALO was a student who had gone to a very early board meeting, and she was there to watch her 6-year-old cousin perform. That happens at school board meetings. You see the local performance. And she watched that. And then she stayed a little longer and the public comments came up and she heard people standing up and saying, these books need to be removed. And just on the fly got up and spoke. She'd never done it before, knew nothing about the subject other than, what do you mean you want to remove books? I need to see myself in a book. And that she was invited to join DALO, and that group of students started to become advocates, and they went to board meetings. We went down and we started to film. So the story, we wanted to follow students' reaction to book bans. And in doing that, man, did we learn a lot from these students. They were all high school seniors at the time from 3 different high schools. We followed 3 students. And we watched the growth. We watched the process. And, Beaufort is a southern town. It's a sleepy southern town. It's pretty calm. Everybody is a little genteel. The board meetings were pretty calm and the students were very good at speaking their word and being respectful and all of that, and fought the fight. And we followed them throughout this process, and we took them on a journey as they learned more about how to be activists and what it means to be an activist, and learning a little bit more about First Amendment rights and 14th Amendment rights and how all this plays out. So they, throughout the course of the film, you watch them grow in that outreach. They go to Washington, D.C. a couple of times. Yep. They met with Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is the king of, he ran the book banning committee in Congress, and they met with constitutional scholars at Howard University and American University. We went to Chicago to the American Library Association National Convention, where they spoke on stage in front of 1,000 people following Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. It was
Mm-hmm.
an amazing experience, but they took these opportunities to learn more about their rights and what was happening and what they should be doing, could be doing, wanted to be doing to react to that. So it was an amazing experience to make this film, but it started from a newspaper headline locally.
I love anything like that because there's something so genuine and grassroots about the beginning that is just so honest and unexpected. And it took you on this journey to create this film. You said the kids were in high school. How old were they in high school? Just out of
They
curiosity.
were a combination of 17 and 18.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout the early part of this film, they became voters,
Okay.
which was a privilege for
Right.
them, and they took it very seriously. And but didn't flaunt it. It's like this is an American right, and we did this as part of coming of age. But they became voters, which they understood that their voice when speaking at a board meeting had a little bit more
Oh
weight
yeah.
when it was about voting, because a lot of what you'll learn in the film, if you don't know, is
Mm-hmm.
down ballot voting is really important. So, a lot of school boards in this country are nonpartisan. And
Mm-hmm.
because they're nonpartisan, they're at the bottom of the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you vote for all these things. And then down here, these are nonpartisan. And a lot of people don't even go that far. A lot of
Absolutely.
people don't look into who the people are that are running. Why are they running? And it shows the importance of paying attention to that, because the people who are paying attention to that are the people who want to take over the school boards,
Yes.
Moms for Liberty and others.
And that has been, I mean, we've definitely seen that. So Defense of Democracy started in 2022 in direct opposition to Moms for Liberty. And what, in my humble opinion, the school board was kind of the weakest link in the chain of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
That was what nobody was watching. Nobody even went to board. I think I had maybe been to 3 or 4 school board meetings over the course of my children's careers in school. And that made it an easy mark for people to get in, for these bad actors to get in before anybody really knew who they were. Like now everybody knows Moms for Liberty, or their homophobic statements, their censors, their book banners, they've got this reputation that they have earned.
Mm-hmm.
But before that happened, they just look like this cute little group of moms, and they try to do it in my district. That's how Defense of Democracy started. I was like, who is these people? And let me, woo. And then I found out, and it was like, holy cow.
Right.
So it is, and it is remarkable to me. And this is a big point that we see in the film, that a single person in a district could cause so much chaos.
Mm-hmm.
As like you just mentioned, you had one person go, or 1 or 2 people go in, and they banned how many, or they tried to ban how many books? And
97 books. Right.
Right. And that there's this chilling effect where they go in, and they went in to say that all we say is we want to ban these books. So all those books are off the shelf for quote review.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that it works.
Yes. And, it does work. And the problem is Moms for Liberty has made it possible for people who aren't even Moms for Liberty members, or who are just sort of following the playbook,
Right.
have made it possible to cause this chaos without having to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, the playbook for Moms for Liberty starts with book looks. It's the online website where they are going to detail all of these books, and they're going to pull out sections of the books that read this one out loud. And here's why we say this doesn't exist, but they're not reading the whole book, and they're not looking at it in context, and they're not looking at who's reading the book and why they're reading that.
Right.
And they'll go to a board meeting with a printout from Book Looks, which we've caught the Moms for Liberty in Charleston doing in her hand, reading from this printout these sections that are out of context.
Yeah.
And the problem is they're not looking at they're what they're trying to say is, and one of the things you find in this film is that in Florida, some of the laws that have passed and some of the things that have happened down there, because that's the where a lot of this started, they came up with a bill that basically says, if you are reading a book at a board meeting as a part of a public comment, and anyone on the school board stops you from reading it, that book is now deleted, is now removed from the school libraries in that district.
I did
All
not
you
know
have to do
that.
is read something and have them stop you. So they have people going in and reading out of context excerpts that may seem like they're inappropriate,
Right.
and they're being stopped. And the problem is, kids don't read books that way. They
Nobody
don't take
does.
a book and go stand in the middle of a public square and read it out loud.
Right.
They read it to learn something, to see themselves, to learn about someone else, the mirrors and windows we all learn about. And so it's so disingenuous that it's almost laughable. But, in a state like Florida, it becomes law. South Carolina is on the heels of that. We
Wow.
have passed a resolution here that is extremely harmful and actually just caused the first lawsuit, and NAACP is filing a lawsuit against it. But it's, and I don't want to give away the film. I'd like for people to watch it, but it's something that has been out there a lot so far. It's in pre-release. We've had a lot of screenings around the country. You can still request a screening. We'll be doing that for the next year, but it also will be released to the public in the next couple of months. So it'll be widely available. But so I don't want to give away what it is, but it's not. None of this is a secret. We've been pretty open while making the film, what we were covering. So, the students who fought back in South Carolina were ultimately, after more than a year, successful. They had 91 of the 97 books returned to the shelves. 5 books were permanently banned.
Mm-hmm.
One book was never even in the schools that the parents brought as which just shows how
Yeah.
little work they're doing. So they were successful. And on the heels of that, as we were wrapping up filming for this, on the heels of that, a new resolution came out that was being discussed. And so we watched the students go to protest this and to say this can't happen. And the resolution basically gave the power to the state superintendent of education at her discretion to remove books if somebody brought a protest, to remove books not just in that district, but statewide. And it also said in this resolution that there was no opportunity to what's the word I'm looking for, to arbitrate, to go against it, to bring it back up for discussion. There's a word there, and I'll find it. You couldn't, if a book is banned, you can't argue that it's done. If a book comes up for her review that she decides is not banned and can go back into the schools, that can be argued. It's so backwards and it's so unfair. So we cover that in this film, and now some of those books have been permanently banned that were put back on the shelves. There's another 4 coming up for review shortly, and they'll do them 4 at a time. And these are not coming from school districts. These are coming from staff members. They're coming from 1 or 2 parents somewhere in the state that have nothing to do with that school district. So it's going downhill pretty fast.
Well, I want to say, in viewing the film myself, as I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, this needs to be required viewing for all of my volunteers, because I feel like a broken record when I'm like trying to explain, how one person can go in and get 97 books pulled off a shelf. We talk about what's the meaning of, what is the definition of pornography, right? Like, pornography is not a paragraph out of a book. Can you go into a little more detail about what pornography actually is and what people are using it as?
Right. Well, pornography, honestly, is to cause a reaction from someone, a sexual reaction. And that, that might exist in some books to make a statement about something, but the majority of what exists in the books that are being brought up for challenges to be banned have to do more with the fact that there's LGBTQ issues, there's transgender issues, there are race issues. These are not pornographic issues. So, or they are issues such as one of the authors we interview in the film is Ellen Hopkins. She is the most banned author in the United States. Her books, if anyone has ever read them, are mostly based on some form of experience or family member or friend who went through something, and they are cautionary tales. So if she writes a book in which a teenager is abused by a family member, sexually abused by a family member, they're saying that's pornographic.
Right.
it's not pornographic. It's a
No.
cautionary tale. And what you are doing is saying that doesn't exist and that doesn't happen. So if a student goes to a school and maybe they don't have access to that book at home, but they have access to that book in a school library where they can on their own read it and learn something and decide, do I talk to somebody? Do I understand what's happening? This is not pornography. So we do, I try to not leave it up to me to tell anybody what is pornographic or not. We have experts in this film explaining
and
definitions.
Those experts, their background is in, and the other part of pornography is that, pornography is the reason that piece of literature or that work of art exists is for sexual stimulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a story that might have a passage in it about an experience that the character went through. It does not make this a pornographic book.
Right. And if honestly, which we also touch on in the film, if there is a sexual scene in a book, that is not pornographic by definition, but that maybe isn't a cautionary tale, thinking that high school students aren't aware is incredibly naive. They are, and they have phones and they have internet, and the argument of, well, then they can just go buy that book on Amazon. That's a bad argument. There's a lot of areas in this country where students can't go buy a book on Amazon or can't go to Barnes and Noble or can't even get to their public library because they don't have their own transportation and they're required to go to school. There's a reason to protect these books in schools.
So we're about halfway through the podcast, and I always like about this at this point to do a volunteer shout out. And I did notice that throughout your film, we had several Defense of Democracy volunteers who were featured.
It's actually how I met you guys. It's how I even knew you existed obviously in all the research we do for the film.
Yeah.
But, on the ground, we met people. We have a teacher in Florida, Paul Raub, who is a member of Defense of Democracy. We didn't know at the time. He was a teacher who had been harassed and who wanted to tell part of his story. And then we learned about your organization from that. And certainly here in Charleston, we covered local Charleston school board meetings as well as some protests that were put outside of Moms for Liberty meetings and very peaceful protests and very informative protests put together by Alan Morris, who is your local chapter head here. I'm sure I've met a number of them, but they helped us make this film. And, one of the things that's really important is nobody knows everything going into this. We rely on what's happening in the community, who's organizing that information, how that's getting out, how we find out things, how we fact check things. Right. And Defense of Democracy has actually been really helpful with some of the volunteers that ended up either on screen or behind the scenes or in a background scene. I'm sure there are many more than those two, but those are the two I can think of right now.
Well, I'm really proud of my team. And I don't know if you know this, but Ellen Hopkins is actually on our board of directors.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. Oh, well, we love Ellen Hopkins, obviously.
Oh, yeah. She's amazing. So one of the things that I also wanted to start talking about a little bit is that the Defense of Democracy is hosting our annual film festival in June. We had the film festival the first time last year, and we featured only one film, but it was a good one. It was 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted a Culture, and it was about how and when and why the word homosexual was featured in the Bible. And we had people all over the country hosting these little mini film festivals in their homes, at their libraries, in their, places of worship. And it was really a wonderful experience. And I am so thrilled that Band Together is going to be featured among the films that we are showing through this film festival.
And so are we.
And so you guys have actually won quite a few awards with this film. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've been recognized for in the work you've done here?
Yeah, we've done so far. It's an ongoing thing, festivals when it relates to a new film, especially one that hasn't been released yet. We haven't released the film officially yet. We've been in 7 film festivals so far around the country. At 3 of those festivals, we won Best Documentary Feature Film. which is big because these festivals, have hundreds of submissions. And when you go to the festivals and you see the other films that have been nominated or that have gotten into the festival, the competition is fierce. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stories out there that are being told, and they're being told very well. And one thing we're very proud of with this film is the human aspect of the story that we're telling. The subject isn't fun. The subject is not new. There's a new take on it. There's a new, in history, book banning has been an issue and book burning is an issue. And the people who are doing those things are simply shapeshifters. They show up in different kinds of organizations and different names and different looks, and they'll continue to do that. So it's not a new story, but the human story behind it is what we really wanted to show and how it affects people on the ground. So we were able to win Best Feature Film at 3 of those festivals. We were in Pennsylvania, we were in Rehoboth Beach, we were in the Lone Star Festival in Texas, did 2 in LA. There will be more coming up. They're sort of throughout the year. We missed the deadline for a couple of the big ones, for Sundance and things like that, because we decided in making the film that we weren't going to make decisions about what was in it based on a schedule that a film festival put out. Of course, as a filmmaker, we want to be in Sundance, but there was more to tell, and we weren't finished. So we missed some of those deadlines, and that's fine. Our interest in this film is to get as many people to watch it as possible in the end. It's why we have the screenings happening around the country right now, and we'll continue to do those. It's why we like to be in film festivals. It's a different audience every time you do that. And the way you do yours, I particularly like, because normally, and COVID film festivals brought this sort of like virtual screenings at festivals.
Right.
Sort of started, and a lot of those still happen, but festivals are still very much on the ground, and the way you do your festival allows more people to see it, and it allows more different kinds of groups to get together in different settings, and it's a really great way to show the film.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to it. For anybody who's listening, our film festival is going to be taking place in June. We are currently actively watching and vetting films and having a great time overall. I also wanted to mention, you're talking about like how you really followed the story and not necessarily locking yourself into a timeline. I mean, I will speak as somebody who watched your documentary. You become very invested in these kids. You feel for them, but I didn't feel sorry for them. A part of me was like, gosh, they're 17. They should be having fun. They should be doing that. But they were so empowered, and you could see that this was like, they felt so good about what they were doing and about themselves, that I think, especially now, it is so important for young adults to get involved in advocacy projects, especially for things that are going to directly impact their learning and their outlook on life, their critical thinking skills, like everything that they have. And this film did a great job of doing that.
Yeah, they've grown up quite a bit during this film, whether they wanted to or not, in that time frame.
Yeah.
And they're now, I think, sophomores in college. They go to 3 different schools. They're still active. They're still active in the community, and they're still fighting the fight. And they support now, as adults, they go back and support the DALO organization, which now has, I think, 9 or more locations throughout South Carolina, and that continues to grow.
Wow.
And other organizations that fought alongside them, like Families Against Book Bans, is a great example of it. It's a Beaufort-based organization of parents, of adults that are in the position to continue the arguments, not just for book bans, it's transgender care, it's everything that they do, but they can go to the State House. They can carpool, they can show up, they can speak, they can communicate as adults. And these young adults, sort of matriculate almost into these other organizations that continue to ask the same thing of them at a different level, and work closely with the ACLU and other organizations to make sure when they go to the State House to speak, they have facts.
Yes.
And they've vetted, and they're not just out there, doing something because they're angry about something. They're angry, but they're organized. And so these groups that come, and Defense of Democracy is one. There's these organizations that you don't have to do this alone. what the students learned, the biggest lesson in this is I'm not alone. I feel like it's wrong that these books were taken, and I don't feel that I'm not the only one who feels that that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing they did was say, maybe the three of us can talk about this together. And then maybe we can go to our first board meeting together to speak. And then the parents get behind them and the teachers and the librarians, and the respect just grows. So you're not doing it alone, but you can also matriculate as you get older to organizations that might have a little bit different look, but we're all still out there fighting for our First Amendment rights and other parts of the Constitution that we think should hold.
Right.
I say that with
Fingers
a bit of
crossed. On that note, I do always like to end the podcast on a positive note.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is for you, what are you looking forward to in the weeks and months to come?
Well, I'm looking for specific to the film. I'm looking forward to the film doing more publicly what it has done privately.
Mm-hmm.
So in our pre-release, we've had a bunch of screenings around the country. They've been at libraries, they've been at churches, they've been with organizations like the ACLU or PEN America or Defense of Democracy or someone like that hosting it.
Right.
And what came out of those was a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It was, okay, we saw this film. Now we want to talk about it because we've had people at those screenings say, I didn't realize how important it was to vote for my school board members.
Yeah.
I am a teacher, I'm a librarian, and I actually didn't know in my community this was happening, and now I think it is. I think I'm not alone, and I feel comfortable that I'm with peers. We want that to continue on a household basis. When this gets out on Amazon Prime or Hulu and on those places when you can have access to this film, it's still meant to be a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we continue the conversation and we continue the support that happens in the film, then that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
Helping each other speak, helping each other understand the truth behind something, helping each other understand you're not alone. There are other people that feel the same way you feel. You don't ever have to get up and speak alone. You can participate in ways that aren't going to a school board meeting and speaking at a microphone. There's all sorts of things you can do behind the scenes, and there's a lot of people out there doing that. These conversations that happen after the film have proven to us as filmmakers, we didn't go into this as an activist. We went in as filmmakers, have proven to us there's a lot of people out there who feel this way. And there's a lot of people out there who don't want this to happen. Mm-hmm. So we're building a coalition, as you would an organization like Defense of Democracy, around a tool that we happen to have made that we are proud of and that we stand behind, and that tells a truthful situation, a truthful story behind a situation that was difficult to go through. And the film does have hope at the end.
It does.
It really
does.
You feel like, oh, okay, they went through this, and even though there's the setback with the state, it's still in our hands, and we still have power, and we're still living in a democracy. So we have to, talk about it. We can't be silent.
Well, Jenn, thank you so much for joining the film, the Defense of Democracy podcast. I will be including links for how people can watch your film and to the film website. I'll include that in our show notes. And I definitely look forward to our film festival. So everybody stay tuned. That is going to be happening in June. We're going to start talking about it probably in the next few weeks.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. And to all those Defense of Democracy and other organization people who do end up in this film in the background fighting, mention it. Go out there and say, I was part of this film. I was in it. I was at that meeting. It's a proud thing to do and show people, show people your work.
Show people how to stand up and how to speak out. Absolutely.
Great. Well, I appreciate it, Karen. Thanks for having me on.